So I received a DM recently from one of the people from Brazil that I spent a lot of time talking to. He was asking me how it is that all Norwegians are able to speak English with such, why all Norwegians are so good at speaking English. First of all, I started thinking about why it is that people actually think that. So the reality here is that most of us, we live a pretty secluded life. Like, we don't really have to interact too much with people from outside of Norway. And the people don't spend any time interacting with people from outside of Norway. They're not really that proficient in English. Like, they're able to hold a conversation, and I'll get back to how they reach that level and how basically all Norwegians reach that level. I'm pretty certain that you're seeing a pretty skewed image when you're seeing Norwegians speaking English, because you're probably seeing them online and such. And here's the thing, people that are online from Norway that are speaking English, I mean, they're spending most of their day online, or they're at least spending a lot of time online. I mean, that's basically just extra studying. I've been talking about this a lot previously. Like, I made a video all on how you can learn a language by playing video games, and how you can learn a language for free just by using your own interests. Feel free to go ahead and watch those videos. And I mean, while you're at it, you might as well subscribe to the channel and then go ahead and watch a few, like, if you find those videos helpful. Not, leave a comment on how I could make the videos better, and I'll try to fix that, and hopefully I'll see you again at some point. The only people that you see, or the only Norwegians that you see, are the Norwegians that interact with people online, because otherwise you wouldn't see them. And there are a lot of us, not compared to Brazilians, but there are a lot of Norwegians, and most of them don't really feel the need to interact with people from outside of Norway. Most of us are perfectly content with keeping to ourselves and spending time with our friends here. And yeah, I mean, Norway is a pretty nice country to live in, so there really isn't that much the need to move from Norway. Therefore, yeah, we end up speaking Norwegian. But the Norwegian school system mentioned how, I mean, most people are able to hold a conversation without much problem. And that is, the Norwegian school system teaches you English for 10 years, and in most cases it teaches you English for at least 11 years. That depends on whether or not you're taking high school. Most people are, not everyone. Most people are. I definitely think that everyone should. Even if you're not taking that, you're still getting 10 years of English tuition. That ends up teaching you a lot. Even if you're not learning that much, you're still getting 11 years of tuition. And I mean, we have teachers that have to go through even more English tuition, so they at least should know what they're talking about. Or at least hope that once I'm done with my master's degree, know what I'm talking about in terms of how to learn English. So that's what I'm studying. Like, my master's thesis is going to be what qualifies me as an English teacher. But there are also other reasons why people end up being so proficient. And that is all related to the amount of input that we get. And this is input outside of school. So it could be watching films, which most films that we end up watching, I can't remember seeing an adult movie ever being aired on Norwegian television dubbed to Norwegian. If it's made in English, which most films are, or at least there are way more films made in English than in Norwegian. If it's made in English and it's made for an adult or teen audience, it's going to be aired in English. And most people end up, for instance, watching series in English. We don't really watch too many series dubbed to Norwegian. But most people, even if they aren't spending time online, if they are the type of people that enjoy watching series using Netflix, using Disney Plus, I mean, you have easy access to series in Norwegian as well. But in those cases, you end up watching a lot of content in English, not in Norwegian, and therefore you end up getting a lot of input. You end up learning a lot, even while not realizing it. And it's the same with YouTube. I mean, there are Norwegian YouTubers, don't get me wrong. Like, most of them, they don't make content in Norwegian, because, I mean, Norway has 5 million people living there. Most Norwegians aren't going to be subscribed to you, meaning that there is basically no hope for your channel to reach like million, which is what a lot of people are hoping for. I mean, that would be Like, for instance, I'd say that sounds pretty cool, and it would be really nice reaching that at some point. But if I had, for instance, decided that I want to be making videos in Norwegian, I wouldn't even have as to the chance at reaching that, because I mean 20% of the Norwegian population aren't going to be subscribing to my channel. Is completely impossible. So even Norwegian YouTubers end up making content in English. And I mean, any other YouTuber you watch that isn't Norwegian is of course also making content in English or in some other language, but most of the time they're making content in English, right? And then we reached the topic of books. So even with books, because we have bookstores are still massive here, and a lot of people spend time reading books. Clearly not as much time as they spend watching series and such, but a lot of people still spend time actually reading physical books. If the author is English, or at least is writing in English, which is the case for most authors, we are going to be reading those books in English. I mean, there are some famous Norwegian authors here, Nesbø and such, and they make some great books. Not my taste, but they make some great books. But most authors are writing in English, so you're getting input there as well if you're reading. And most books that are written in English are available in English here in Norway, no problem. And especially if you're doing like me, where you're reading ebooks, you're probably not going to be finding a lot of ebooks written in Norwegian. So just to sum it up, it's really quite simple. People that you actually do see, people that are active online, those are the only people that from outside of Norway are ever going to be in contact with, because otherwise you just wouldn't see them, because they'd be keeping to themselves. Of course, that leads to your understanding that, okay, all Norwegians are able to speak English with perfect fluency, but that isn't really the case. I don't really consider my English to be perfect. I definitely don't have a clear British accent or a clear American accent. I mean, there are massive differences between my English and some of my friends that are perfectly happy with their lives. They're interacting with a lot of people, but they're interacting with Norwegian people. I have spent time with my Norwegian friends in settings where we've all had to use English. It's because we've been talking to people that aren't from Norway, and some of them are actually struggling. They're not able to use the language how they would like to, and that's due to the fact that they don't have to do that on a regular basis. The only reason why I'm able to speak English and not feel like I'm stumbling over my words the entire time, such, is because I'm actually using my English on a regular basis. That is basically spending at least 20% of my day either speaking English, writing in English, me talking about how I'm not stumbling over my words, then I do that. But I'm spending so much of my day talking or writing in English and even thinking in English. Most people aren't doing that. Even while you end up getting exposed to a lot of English, if you don't speak a lot of English, you're going to be stumbling over your words. I mean, I do that occasionally, but most people that don't spend that time that I do, are even worse at it. They end up stumbling more. So I think it's unfair to say, or I don't think it's realistic to say that all Norwegians speak English completely fluently without an accent, or have perfect English. That's definitely not the case. I think there are a lot of Norwegians that have realized the importance of learning English and learning it well, and that have put in time necessary to do that. I think that is a more fair assessment, and I also think that those are the people that you end up interacting with, that you end up seeing either online or they're traveling. Any other generalization is based off of stereotypes that aren't really completely true. But I mean, the cases that you see where Norwegians are able to speak perfect fluency basically without an accent is also something that should be able to give you a bit of hope, because it shows that it is entirely possible to learn a language basically to perfection, but you reach a level where you're almost taken as for a native, and that is a really fun experience. It just takes a bit of work, but it is still entirely possible. I think that's it. As always, best of luck with your studies, and neck out.